What you are about to hear is a composite. The man is invented, built from the same profile of strong, accomplished, disciplined people I warn every summer, most of whom listen. No real person is named. I'm going to call myself Renata, and the man Gordon. This is a dramatization. The park is real, the heat is real, and the specific way this desert kills the fittest person in it, just as easily as the weakest, is very real. I have been a ranger at Joshua Tree a long time, and I want to be honest about something before I tell you the rest, because it matters. I am fit. You have to be for this job. But I am not what Gordon was. Gordon was extraordinary. I looked him up later, the way you do, and the man had run marathons into his late 60s, had a wall of finishes, trained every single day, ate like a monk, and had a body that had been his life's project for 50 years and looked it. He was genuinely one of the most physically impressive people to ever stand at my desk. I want you to hold that the whole way through, because the easy version of this story is a frail old man who overestimated himself, and that is the opposite of what happened. He did not overestimate his fitness. His fitness was real. I have thought a great deal about who a man like Gordon is because I meet a version of him a few times every summer, and they are almost always wonderful people and almost always the hardest to save. Think about what it takes to be that fit at 71. 50 years of getting up when it was dark and cold and you did not want to. 50 years of finishing the run, the race, the set, when everything in you begged to stop. That kind of body is not luck. It is built out of a specific, admirable, relentless refusal to accept the limit that other people accept, and every year it worked, and every year the world confirmed it. Until refusing the limit was not just something Gordon did, it was who Gordon was. The whole architecture of his pride and his identity and his sense of himself as a man who did not quit and did not fold and did not listen to the people who said he could not. You do not talk a person out of that at a trailhead in 2 minutes. I was not arguing with his opinion. I was arguing with his entire life, and his entire life had a perfect record. He came to the trailhead on a morning we had already closed. That is the first thing that makes this one different, and I need you to understand what a closure is because most people misunderstand it completely. We do not close trails lightly. We do not close them to be careful or to cover ourselves, or because we think you personally cannot handle it. We close a trail when the conditions on it are lethal to human beings, full stop, when the heat has climbed to a place where the desert will kill a fit, prepared, healthy adult who does everything right. A closure is not us judging you, it is us reporting the weather in the strongest language we have, which is a locked gate and a sign. When that sign goes up, it is not saying you are not good enough for this trail. It is saying nobody is good enough for this trail today, because today the trail is not a trail, it is a furnace with a path through it. And I want you to know that we hate closing them. A closed trail is a small failure for us. A beautiful place we cannot let people love that day. And every ranger I know would rather keep everything open and trust people to be sensible. We close a trail only when the sensible option has run out, when the heat has climbed past the point where good judgment and good gear and good fitness stop being enough, where the margin for a healthy person doing everything correctly has shrunk to nothing. So when you walk up and find a barrier where you expected a trail, you are not looking at bureaucracy. You are looking at the one thing rangers do only when they believe, on the evidence in front of them, that the alternative is a body. The closure is the most serious sentence we know how to say, and we say it in wood and metal because words alone were not stopping people. It was 109 degrees climbing. There was another man at that closure not 20 minutes earlier, and I bring him up because he was almost the same story with the opposite ending. Also older, also clearly fit, a serious hiker by the look of his gear, and he had driven a long way for that trail too, and he was disappointed visibly the way anyone would be. And he stood there and read the sign and looked at the sky and asked me a couple of real questions about the heat, and then he nodded and said, "Well, that is that," and asked me where he could go instead that would be safe in this. I sent him up into the higher, cooler country, and he had a good day, and he is alive, and the only difference between that man and Gordon was that when the desert said no, one of them heard information, and the other heard an insult. Gordon walked up to a posted closure, a sign, a barrier, the whole clear apparatus of no, and he was not deterred for 1 second, because in his entire life, a barrier had never once been about him. It had always been about other people's small ideas of what he could do, and he had spent 50 years proving those ideas wrong and being right too. I was the ranger there. I told him the trail was closed. I told him it was 109 and going higher, that there was no shade and no water out there, that we had closed it because the heat was deadly, and I asked him, plainly, to choose a different plan. And he smiled at me, not cruelly, and he told me about himself. The marathons, the training, the races, all true, all impressive, and all offered as an argument, as evidence, as his credential for why the closure did not apply to him. And when I told him, as gently as I could, that fitness was not the thing that would save him out there, he said the sentence. He looked at me, a working ranger, a good deal younger than him, and he said, with total confidence, "I am fitter than you." And here is the thing I have made my peace with. He was absolutely fitter than me. And it did not matter even slightly, and explaining why is the whole point of this. Because fitness and heat survival are two different systems, and being world-class at one tells the desert nothing about the other. Everything Gordon had built, that incredible engine, was a cardiovascular machine, a heart and lungs and muscles trained to move his body efficiently for a long time. That is a magnificent thing, and it is the wrong thing. Surviving extreme heat is not about how strong your engine is. It is about how well your body sheds heat, how acclimatized you are to that specific furnace, how much water you carry against how much you lose, and about the plain physics of a mass of flesh in an oven. And none of that improves because you can run a marathon. In fact, there is a bitter twist buried in it. A powerful engine generates more heat, not less. All that muscle, all that capacity to work hard, produces internal heat as a byproduct of doing what it does, and a fit person pushing hard is adding to the furnace from the inside while the sun adds to it from the outside. The very machinery that made Gordon so capable was, in 109 degrees, one more source of load his body had to shed on a day it could not shed what it already had. Fitness is heat you can make. It is not heat you can lose. On a cool day that is all upside, on that day, it was one more thing stacked against him, and he had spent his life believing it was pure advantage, because everywhere he had ever used it, it had been. Gordon had trained brilliantly for 50 years for an exam the desert was never going to give him. Let me ask you something, because this one is not really about a trail. When was the last time you were genuinely excellent at one thing? And let that excellence convince you that you would be fine at a completely different thing, one where your skill did not actually apply. The great driver who assumes he can handle ice. The strong swimmer who assumes he can handle a current. Tell me below, because that is the exact trap. A real credential in one domain feels from the inside like general authority, like proof. You are simply a capable person who will be capable everywhere. And it is the most convincing lie a competent person ever tells themselves because it is built on something true. And it is worse when the credential is your body, because your body comes with you everywhere. A surgeon does not walk around assuming he can fly a plane, because the operating room stays behind when he leaves it. But Gordon's expertise was physical. It was worn on him, it went out onto that trail inside his own chest, and so it felt less like a specialized skill and more like a general fact about what kind of creature he was. He was not a man who was good at running. He was, in his own understanding, simply a superior physical animal, and a superior physical animal should logically be superior at anything physical. And a desert hike is physical, so of course he would be superior at it. Every step of that reasoning feels airtight from the inside, and every step of it is wrong, because the desert is not testing what kind of animal you are. It is testing whether you understood it well enough to stay out of it, and that is not a physical trait at all. The Rangers were not underestimating Gordon. That is what he could never hear. We were not estimating him at all. We were estimating the heat, and the heat does not have opponents, it has victims, and it takes the fittest and the weakest at the same temperature. When I looked at him, I was not seeing a man who was too old or too weak. I was seeing 109 degrees, which does not care what your heart rate is, and I was seeing a closure that was correct. He went around the sign. That is the hinge, and it was not dramatic. He did not argue further, he just thanked me the way confident people do when they have decided you are irrelevant, and he stepped around the barrier and started up the closed trail at a strong, easy pace, and I could not stop him, because a ranger cannot physically tackle a grown man for walking, and I stood there and watched one of the fittest people I had ever met walk into a place I knew would kill him, and there was nothing in my authority that let me do anything but log it and dread it. And now I have to tell you the part that people find hardest to believe, which is that his fitness did not just fail to save him. It actively made things worse, and it made them worse fast. And it is the reason the title of this says 4 hours. Because a superbly trained body can override its own alarms. All of us have a set of warnings the body sends when it is in trouble in the heat, the early fatigue, the heaviness, the voice that says slow down, stop, turn around. In an ordinary person, those warnings hit early and hit hard and tend to stop them before they are too deep. Gordon had spent 50 years training himself to push through exactly those signals. His entire athletic life was the discipline of ignoring the body's complaints and continuing, of treating discomfort as weakness leaving, of finishing no matter what. So when the desert began sending him the warnings that might have turned a lesser hiker back at the first mile, he did the thing he had trained 10,000 times to do. He pushed through them. He kept his strong, easy pace. He went deep and he went fast, faster and deeper than an unfit person ever could have. Because that is what fitness is, the ability to go farther and harder before you stop. And this is the piece I most wish people understood, because it turns everything upside down. We think of the body's warnings as a nuisance, as weakness, as the thing that stops us from achieving. And in a gym, in a race, on a cool morning, maybe they are, and training yourself to override them is how you win. But out here, those warnings are not weakness. They are the single most valuable safety system you own, an early alarm wired straight into your survival, and the whole point of it is to stop you before you go too far to come back. An unfit person's alarm is loud and it is honored because they have no choice but to honor it, and it saves their life by embarrassing them into turning around while they still can. Gordon had spent 50 years installing an override on that exact alarm. He had trained his mind to silence the one voice that was trying to save him, and he had gotten so good at it that by the time the alarm was screaming loudly enough to reach him anyway, he was already too far gone for the message to matter. And that meant that when his body finally hit the wall that no amount of training can push through, the wall where the heat simply exceeds what a human being can shed, he hit it a very long way out alone, in a closed section of desert, having outrun every warning that might have saved him. His fitness did not put a floor under him. It launched him past the point of no return before his own body could apply the brakes, and it launched him there faster than we could ever have reached him. His age was the last piece, and I say it with respect, not as an insult, because it is simply true. An older body, however fit, sheds heat less well than a young one. The cardiovascular system that regulates temperature does not stay 25 no matter how many miles you run, and a 71-year-old in 109 degrees is carrying a real physiological disadvantage that fitness softens but does not erase. Gordon had done a magnificent job of staying young. He had not, because no one can actually become young, and the desert reads the true number, not the impressive one. I say this carefully because it is the part that could sound like I am blaming him for being old, and I am not. Age is not a failing, and it is not a mistake. But it is real, and out here, honesty about it is survival. A 71-year-old heart, however beautifully conditioned, has a smaller reserve for the enormous work of cooling a body in extreme heat than a 30-year-old heart does. And the systems that manage temperature grow less responsive with the decades no matter how you live. Fitness narrows that gap. It does not close it. Gordon had spent his life narrowing it admirably, further than almost anyone, and he had come to believe he had closed it entirely, that he had simply beaten age, and the desert is the one place that will quietly, instantly, and without any drama at all, reveal the difference between narrowing a gap and closing it. I am not going to walk you through his last hour, and I am not going to put you out there with him, because he was a real person, and this channel has a line I will not cross. His car sat at the trailhead, and I already knew, the way you know, from the moment the hours started stacking up and the lot stayed one car too full. And when he did not come back, we went in after him, into the closed trail, in the worst of the heat, ourselves now exposed to the exact conditions we had closed the trail to keep people out of, and the very fitness that had carried him so far so fast was now the distance we had to cover to reach him. That is a thing people never think about. A fit person in trouble is not easier to save. They are harder because they got themselves deeper before they fell, out past where a slower person would have collapsed while still in reach. His gift for covering ground did not shorten our search. It lengthened it. By every mile his training had let him put between himself and the gate before the heat finally caught what his will had been outrunning. He was found on the closed trail. The ruling was heat-related. 4 hours from the barrier he stepped around to the end. For a man who could have run a marathon that morning and by every measure that mattered to him was one of the fittest people alive. If any of this reached you, do the small thing that carries it to the next strong, accomplished person about to walk around a sign. Like this video so it finds someone at a closed gate instead of a comment section, and subscribe so you are here for the next one. Not for me, and not for a number on a screen. Do it so that one more genuinely impressive, disciplined, capable person somewhere hears a ranger say the trail is closed and understands that the closure is not a challenge and not an insult, and turns around and goes home to run for another 20 years. The fittest people are the ones I lose, and they are the ones I would give anything to reach because they have so much life left in those bodies, and the desert does not know or care about a single day of it. I have thought about Gordon more than almost anyone, and here is where it leaves me. He did not die because he was weak. He died because he was strong, and because he had spent a lifetime learning that his strength was the answer to everything, and it had been in every arena he had ever chosen to enter. The tragedy is not that he was arrogant about a fitness he did not have. He had it. The tragedy is that he brought the wrong strength to the one fight where it counted for nothing, and he could not conceive that such a fight existed because he had never lost one. And so when the desert offered him a contest his body could not win, he could not even see it as a contest. He saw a rule for other people, and he was, in his own mind, never other people. There is a hard and useful idea in all of this, and it is this. The strengths that build a whole successful life are almost always specialized, even when they feel general. And every one of us is walking around with a track record in some arena that quietly tells us we are exceptional, and that record is true. And it is also silent about every arena we have not entered. The competent are not killed by their weaknesses out here. They are killed by their strengths, aimed at the one thing their strength does not touch, with all the confidence a lifetime of being right has earned them. Gordon is not a warning about frailty. He is a warning about excellence, about what happens when a genuinely superior ability meets the one situation that ability was never about, in a person who has forgotten that such situations exist. The heat was never testing his fitness. That is the thing I wish I could have made him hear, in a way that reached him, before he stepped around that sign. It was not a harder version of the races he had won. It was not a test of heart or lungs or will or discipline, the things he was the best in the room at. It was a test of a completely different set of things, acclimatization, and water, and shade, and humility, and the simple wisdom to not be out there at all. And on that test, his lifetime of training earned him nothing, and his greatest gift, the ability to push his body past what it wanted to do, was the exact thing that carried him too far to be saved. He told me he was fitter than me, and he was, and he is gone, and I am here. And the difference between us was never fitness. It was that I believed the closure, and he thought it was beneath him. The desert closed that trail for everyone that day, the fastest and the slowest, the youngest and the oldest, the marathoner and the man who has never run a step, all of them, equally, because 109 degrees is a fact and not an opinion, and it does not read your record before it decides. I still think about the two of them at that gate, the stranger who was disappointed and drove up into the cool country and lived, and Gordon, so much the more impressive of the two, who stepped around the sign and did not. Nothing about their bodies decided that. Everything about how they heard one word decided it. One of them heard closed as a fact about the day. The other heard it as a verdict on himself and could not stand to accept a verdict he had beaten his whole life, and went to prove it wrong in the desert, which has never once cared what any of us has proven, simply agreed with the sign. This has been Doomed Departures. Stay safe, and we will see you on the next one.